In this collection of videos, we're thinking through how we understand and perhaps misunderstand the whole notion of salvation. What is Christianity all about? In this collection of videos, we're going to be looking at the meaning of this wonderful term salvation and putting it in its larger biblical framework. And as we do so, there's all kinds of exciting things which come out, which I think many Christians today simply miss out on because they've quite rightly grasped something important, but have failed to see how it connects up with all the other important things that the Bible has to say. I suspect if I was to go out on the street here in Oxford where we're making these videos and ask people what's Christianity all about, quite a lot of people would say it's about salvation. And if you pressed them and said, what exactly do you mean by salvation? They would look a bit surprised and they'd say, well, going to heaven when you die, stuff like that. And indeed, I think when people say they believe in Christianity, often that is the primary thing they mean. And indeed, when people say they don't believe in Christianity, the primary thing they don't believe is about people going to heaven when they die. But going to heaven, oddly, is not apparently the subject of either the Old Testament or the New Testament. Many people just assume it is, and so read all sorts of things in the Bible as though that's what it's saying. But actually, again and again, in both Old and New Testaments, the point is not how do humans find their way up to somewhere called heaven, but how does the God of heaven come to dwell with us or for us or amongst us. Again and again, that's, as it were, the direction of travel. So what does salvation mean when we put it in that larger framework? It's a big word, it's an important word. So some other people have said, well, salvation actually isn't about us going to heaven, it's about us trying to make the world a better place now. If you look at people who are refugees and homeless, if you look at people who are hungry and desperately sick, then telling them that there's a salvation which is pie in the sky when you die doesn't seem to address their immediate concern. And one of the things we know about Jesus of Nazareth is he went around addressing people's immediate concerns. So it looks as though we might be getting something wrong if we simply talk about what can become an escapist vision. Let's get out of here and go somewhere nicer. What about the people who are hurting on the street, floating around looking for somewhere to land their refugee boats in the real world here and now? And so many Christians have said, actually, that's what salvation is all about. The trouble with that is it's been tried before, and there's a kind of a sinking feeling. At the beginning of the 20th century, many Christians said, this Christianity thing is about us making the world a better place. And then we had the First World War, and then we had the Holocaust and all that, and so many other horrors. And people have largely given up the idea that if only Christians tried a bit harder, that's what they would do. Now, of course, the early Christians, if we say, what is this movement that you're part of all about, they would talk about Jesus himself. And when you talked with them about Jesus himself, Jesus would not just be the means to an end. Oh, well, Jesus is the means by which you get to heaven, or Jesus is the means by which we make the world a better place. But Jesus is himself the focal point, the one who explains to us, not just in words, but in deeds and in his very person, what life is really all about and what life can and should be all about. And yes, Jesus, of course, talked not infrequently about people being saved. And I remember being confused by this when I was quite a young man thinking about it, often when Jesus talks about somebody being saved, it means they've just been healed. He heals a blind person and says, your faith has saved you. And what he means quite clearly is, now you can see again. And that happens several times, so that salvation on Jesus' own lips seems to mean more than something after this life. It includes God doing things in the present time which are rescuing the situation. And of course, salvation means rescue, something which was in a mess being made better, something which was hurting being healed, something which was lost being found. Think of Jesus' stories about the prodigal son. Your brother was lost and is found. He was dead and is alive again. But all of this happens within the context where Jesus is talking about something else. And he doesn't use the word salvation as the primary thing that he's trying to get across. He talks about the kingdom of God. And when he talked about the kingdom of God, I, as a young man reading that, assumed that the kingdom of God meant heaven, meant going to heaven. But when you look and see what Jesus is saying, he teaches us to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. It's about heaven coming to earth, not about us earthlings going to heaven. So how does that work? What is the kingdom of God? And how does it bring about the salvation of which Jesus himself spoke and which the early Christians celebrated and we today know is part of the very heart of what we're all about? Well, the kingdom of God does include God's ultimate purpose, which transcends death, God's ultimate purpose for a new world in which, however we die, God is going to give us a new life in his presence forever. That's there, but it needs to be thought through. And likewise, because it's about Jesus talking about God's kingdom coming on earth as in heaven, that is there as well, because earth needs to be rescued from so many things. And ultimately we are told that will happen when Jesus comes again to complete the work that he began in his public career. But when we think about what it means to be saved, we've got a more complicated map than we might have imagined when we started out. And so in this series of talks, this little sequence of videos, we're going to be looking at how that actually works out. And as we go through, you'll see that the meaning of salvation remains central, but we'll be teasing out in the way that the Bible teases it out, the way it actually works and how we can plug into it for ourselves. We have several videos in this series on the whole meaning of salvation. Please feel free to click the link to follow and watch the next one.